Here we go. Hi, I'm Meredith, and this is my first YouTube video. This is something I've been wanting to do for a really long time, but I just keep putting it off. But no more. No more excuses. We're doing it today. I love books. Love books. Love reading them. Love writing them. Well, I don't know if I always love writing them. It's a little bit of an experience sometimes. If you've ever tried to write a book, you know what I mean. But it's enjoyable in its own special, unique way. But yeah, so I'm working on a book, and I read a lot, and I can only talk about those two subjects so much with my friends before I won't have any friends anymore. And I would like to keep my friends. So instead, I'm trying to make friends on the internet. But yeah, just looking for a place to talk about the books that I read and the book that I'm writing. So if that's something that you'd be interested in, this is the place for you. So it's June. And I have not read near the amount of books that booktubers typically have read by this time of year, but I almost feel like there needs to be representation for that. I feel like some of these book YouTubers read way too many books. They just put way too much pressure on us. And then at the end of the year, they have this huge wrap-up video where they can only say a sentence about each book, and it's still 45 minutes because they read 120 books in a year or something insane like that. I'm not that kind of gal, okay? I have a full-time job. I have a friend group. I go out and do things. And I'm writing a book. So I've read 11 books so far this year. I know that's laughable. That's laughable to some people who post on YouTube, but that's okay. All right? This is a safe space for you and me, those of us who can only read a normal amount of books. So the first book I read this year is No, that's her other one. Okay. Hang on. The first book I read this year is Love on the Brain by Hazelwood. She's most famous for her book, The Love Hypothesis, which I actually have also read. It was just last year, so it doesn't fall into the criteria for this video. This one is about Levi. He has soul-piercing eyes, it says right here. That's an important detail. And B, I forgot that was her name. Anyway, basically, B and Levi have been enemies since college, or so she thinks. And they're on a project together at NASA, and she thinks he's sabotaging her. She also has an anonymous Twitter account where she talks about science. And she has a friend on Twitter that also has an anonymous Twitter account where they also talk about science. Who runs the other Twitter account, you might ask? Who's to say? Who's to say? None of my business. But anyway, basically she thinks he's sabotaging his... What? Basically, she thinks that he's sabotaging her project. Is he actually? You'll have to read and find out. I will say I read this on a beach in Costa Rica, and I feel like it's really hard to not like a book that you read on a beach in Costa Rica. I loved this one. I really did. I thought it was sweet. The ending is wild. Okay, the ending is crazy, but I thought it was sweet. I thought it was steamy. And I don't know. I enjoyed it. I eat this kind of thing up. Okay, I love Hazelwood's writing. I really do. I have also read her more recent one, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. It has a more fan fiction-y feel, so if you're not a big fan of fan fiction style writing in romance, then you might not like this that much. But for me, I'm a huge fan of no thoughts, only vibes, just hanging out kind of romance, and that's exactly what I felt like this was. And so I loved it. I really did. I highly recommend. Star rating. So what star rating did I give it? Let me ask Goodreads. I gave it a 5-star. Would you look at that? So I clearly really liked it. Next up, we have Heartstopper by Osman. This is what the show is based off of, although I will admit now I have not watched the show yet. I always get super behind on TV shows, okay, but I will get there eventually. I will get there, I promise. This is a graphic novel, so it's told in kind of comic booky form. Is that focusing? Yeah. So it is a graphic novel, and it's a story of Charlie and Nick. And they're in high school, and do they fall in love? I don't know. You'll have to read to find out. But it is a romance, so I feel like that kind of tells you the answer to that, doesn't it? It's really sweet. I believe it is a YA, but it's just a good time, and it's a quick read. I feel like, especially if you're in a reading slump, something like a graphic novel is the perfect thing to get you out of it, because you can just tear through it super quickly, and you're only really reading the text. You can look at the pictures instead of having to read description and stuff. So I don't know. I really, really did enjoy it. I don't know how it parallels to the TV show, but I definitely want to read the rest of the series. I just have to actually pick it up. Because I don't like to read graphic novels on Kindle, I'll be honest. It's not the experience for me, so I do have to go get the physical copies, but I will. Again, rating. What rating did I give that? I also gave that a 5-star. Look at that. We kicked off the year with 2 5-star reads. And I didn't even remember that I gave them those ratings. But I guess I was feeling good at the beginning of the year. Third book I read, not going to get that high rating. I read the fine print. I don't own it in physical copy, but it is by Lauren Asher. And it wasn't for me, I'll be honest, and I'll tell you why. It's in a series called The Dreamland Billionaires, and it's supposed to kind of be based off of, like, the Disney family. Their grandpa is kind of meant to be like a Walt Disney parallel, right? And the parks are called Dreamland instead of Disneyland. And when he passed away, he wrote into his will that each of his grandsons had to do something specific in order to get their inheritance. And so I read Terms and Conditions first, which is actually the second one, but with romance series you usually don't have to go in order. And in that one, it was that he was like, wanted to be the CEO, and he didn't believe in love, but then he like had to get married in order to get his inheritance. And so he kind of enters a fake marriage, but it was like fake marriage to real marriage. I actually enjoyed that one fine. I think the beginning bothered me a little bit because he does end up fake marrying his secretary, which is like right at the beginning, so that's not a spoiler. And so there's a little bit of like an HR question, but it's like so small and like just in the beginning that I feel like you can easily suspend your disbelief, just enter the romance and like enjoy it, so the premise is like kind of a little whatever, right? But with this one, with the fine print, I feel like the HR transgressions were just insane. I mean, seriously, there is no way that would have gone down in real life without like a lawsuit and like a cancellation of the guy. Okay, I don't want to dive too far into it because I don't want to spoil it. His thing that he has to do for the will has to do with the park. I don't quite remember what it is, but he has to like go to the park, and he either has to be the director of it for a certain period of time, or he has to like do something specific. I don't quite remember, honestly, but he had to go be the director of the park for about 6 months was part of it. And he ends up falling for one of the like equivalent of the Imagineers, right? The Disney Imagineers. The problem being not that he fell in love with her and that he's the director of the park and she's an employee, because that would be quite enough. But she actually hates his guts for a good portion of this book. He pretends to be somebody else and texts him from like a fake identity, basically, texts her from a fake identity, basically, to like talk to her because she hates his real persona. And he just like keeps showing up wherever she is at work and like interacting with her. And he also, this is a bit of a spoiler, so heads up, I'll put the word on the screen or put a timestamp or something. But he also like fully kisses her at one point, and she is still in a point where she like despises him. I mean, there is literally no way that this guy would not have had to have been removed. Family connection or not, like, there is no way this wouldn't have turned into a huge HR thing. Like, and I could, even if I thought it was messed up, I could still suspend my disbelief if she was into it the whole time, right? Even though there still is a power dynamic there. If she was, like, into it, like I said with the first book, they were pretty into each other from the start. So, it was kind of, there wasn't, like, a weird power dynamic going on through the whole thing. But a huge part of the book is that she doesn't like him. She wants him to stop, but she can't really make him stop because he's the director of the park. And that's, like, textbook sexual harassment. So, this one really wasn't for me. I don't know what I did rate it. I gave it a 3. So my standards are low, apparently. Yeah, not for me. I'm surprised I rated that high. I remember not liking it a lot more than that rating dictates, but, is what it is. So yeah, that one wasn't for me. Next up, we have the most recent Adventure Zone novel, The 11th Hour. I actually really enjoyed this. They are graphic novels that are based on a podcast, like a D&D podcast, that their first campaign got really, really popular, and they did it for like years. And so they're kind of making graphic novels out of the campaign. I highly recommend the podcast. I think it's super fun, and I think the graphic novels really hold up. I think they carried over a lot of the humor from the podcast into the graphic novels, which I appreciate. And yeah, I just really enjoy it. It's a good time. And so if you're into that kind of thing, if you like graphic novels, it's a graphic novel specifically set in like a Dungeons and Dragons kind of world, but it's a campaign all written by their DM, Griffin. And yeah, I just think that they're really fun. So I highly recommend them. Short and sweet. We love it. Next, I read Ice Planet Barbarians. This I read actually for a book club I have with some friends of mine where we read like kind of goofier, smuttier books. And we had a blast. We had a blast with this one, let me tell you. There were some great lines that I highlighted throughout the whole thing. There's some really, really funny quotes. But I genuinely feel like if you really like just no thoughts, only vibes romance, same vibe as Allie Hazelwood, right? Same kind of idea. I think if you enjoy that kind of book, you would actually really enjoy Ice Planet Barbarians. I do think reading it in a setting of like having other people that you can talk to about it is super fun, because it is kind of goofy, it is kind of fun, but I did also find it to be pretty entertaining. Like, I found myself engaged the whole time. I didn't feel like I was forcing myself to read it, and I actually did really enjoy it. I'm guessing that I gave it like a 4. What did I have it? 4 stars. Look at that. That's the first one I've been able to predict so far of my own ratings. So that shows how your feelings change as time passes. Anyway, yeah, I just really liked it. I think if you don't like if you want intelligence in your literature, you're not going to find it in this book. But you should know that already. I should not have to tell you that. If you enjoy that, like I said, that no thoughts, only vibes, like I'm just, enjoying this kind of feel in a book, I think you would really like this. Next, we have to talk about On the Way to the Wedding by Julia Quinn, which is, I believe, Gregory's of the Bridgerton siblings. You might be familiar. You might have heard of this show. Yeah, I was right. It's Gregory's book. So, Bridgerton obviously has become a huge TV show. It's based off of a book series. I have now read every main siblings book. There are many, many more books. I don't think I'm going to be getting to them. I'm sorry. But I'm going to keep this short and sweet because I do think I'm actually going to be making more of a deep dive into each of the sibling Bridgerton novels and kind of like predicting where I think the show is going to go based off of how they kind of set certain things up. I'm excited for that, so I don't want to spoil it. I'll just say that this was very forgettable. And I found that out when I went to actually go draft out what, start to, plot out how I would do that video, because I don't really remember what happened during this book. And I read it. I finished reading it on April 4th. It is now July 3rd. And I don't really remember what happened, honestly. He's, in love with a girl or something, and he ends up, he's in love with her on first sight and he thinks it's love, but he actually ends up with her best friend or something like that. I don't know. I gave it 1 star, and that tells me that I really didn't like it, but I genuinely right now in this moment could not tell you what prompted me to give it a 1 star. So I guess we'll just both have to find out why I gave it such a bad rating when I go to reread this, a synopsis of it, because I'm not going to reread it if I gave it 1 star. So yeah, I guess we'll find out what I didn't like about it. Next up, we have another dud, but unfortunately it is a dud I physically own, and that's Crave to Conquer by Zoey Ellis. So this I also read for my book club with my girls, and, just wasn't for me, and I'll tell you why. So you'd think, given the books that I've told you I enjoyed throughout this video so far, that I would love Omegaverse fan fiction, but I don't think it's for me, but not because of the Omegaverse piece of it. Allow me to explain. I think everybody should enjoy reading whatever they want. Reading is a beautiful hobby, and whatever genre you enjoy reading, whatever you like that is your business and nobody else's, and nobody should ever judge you for that. I just want to say that because I know that specifically with Omegaverse stuff, a lot of people judge it because it tends to be very sexual and it has kind of a system for the sex built in, which I actually from an author perspective, from a literature perspective, I find that fascinating. Anyway, the reason I don't think the genre is for me is not because of any of that. I don't care about any of that, but it's specifically because of the dominant and submissive nature that a lot of the relationships take on that tends to overlap into their actual romantic relationships. And at least with this book, he was horrible to her, and I mean brutally horrible to her. Definitely look up the trigger warnings if you're going to be reading this. I don't even want to explain the basic premise to you. It was just, there were so many moments in it that were so gross to me, and I was supposed to walk away from the book rooting for them to be together. I was supposed to be wanting them to be together, and at no point during this book did I want them to be together, because he is a horrible person. Horrible. And there's no way around it too. The end of the book was super victim blamey, and a lot of what had happened to the main character, people were saying that she wanted it, and I don't know, it just for me, I just felt it was really a terrible read. And the only reason I forced myself through it was because we picked it, and the reason we picked it was because of that whole lawsuit situation, which, if you're not familiar with, this book got sued by another book for like copyright infringement, but a lot of people are on the side of this author, Zoey Ellis. And so we just thought it'd be interesting. We just thought it'd be fun to mess around with and read and see what had happened from our perspective. But yeah, not for me. Pretty sure I gave it 1 star. Let's see. Did give it 1 star. Which again just leads me to wonder what I despised about the Bridgerton one to give it a 1 star as well. Because it has quite the company in that category for me. Next up is Happy Place, which you can actually see on my shelf right there. I have not grabbed it yet, so I'm going to go do that. I'll be right back. The pinkest of pink books, Happy Place by Emily Henry. This was amazing. I really, really love this. I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. This is about, let me look at their names. You guys, I don't remember names. I don't remember character names. Give me a second. Harriet and Wynn. You have Harriet and Wynn. And they have been broken up for about, I think it's like 4 or 5 months maybe. But they go on this vacation with their friends every year, and they hadn't really told their friends that they'd broken up yet. And she was going to like tell them on the trip, and he wasn't going to go. But then when she gets to the trip, she finds out that he's there because one of their friends, surprise, wants to get married on the trip, and they want everybody to be there. So they kind of bullied him into coming, and he agreed because they were going to get married. Now, my one complaint about this is that it's actually very similar to another book that she's written called People We Meet on Vacation, because you pop back and forth between like early vacations they had on it's like they go to like the Cape in, I think it's in Maine that they go every year, and you pop back to like earlier vacations and you kind of see how the two characters met and their early relationship, and then them like being together over the course of a few years. And then like while that's going on, you keep cutting back to like the present day and them being broken up and like what's going on in like the present day setting. I hope I explained that okay. In People We Meet on Vacation, which is also by Emily Henry, it's a very similar setup where the two characters go on vacation together a lot, and so you kept cutting back to like past vacations they had taken together in order to understand like why those two characters didn't speak anymore. That was more of a friends to enemies to lovers, where they had been friends, they didn't speak anymore, and then they became lovers. This is like a second chance romance. But they did have very similar vibes because of that like kind of cut back and forth idea and being estranged, and that like in the old chapters they're happy together and in the new chapters they're more estranged, and you have to kind of figure out why. But I love Emily Henry's writing. Beach Read is one of my favorite books of all time. It means the world to me. So I don't know. I just feel like I'm never going to not like one of her books because I like that one so much. And this was a fun read. I enjoyed it. I gave it 4 stars. So there you have it. Next up, and the last one we're going to talk about today, is Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. I mentioned this earlier. This is her most recent book. It just came out earlier this month. I literally read it like 2 or 3 weeks ago. And this is about Elsie and Jack. And Elsie is a theoretical physicist, and Jack is an experimental physicist, a job I did not know existed. Apparently, experimental physicists and theoretical physicists don't get along very well. This is drama I'm not privy to. Okay, I'm not up to date on what is happening in the physics community at any one given point in time. But I'm just going to trust Ali Hazelwood's expertise in that this is a very real feud, and I refuse to do any further research about it. Elsie is struggling to find a job post her PhD, and so she's an adjunct professor, but she hates it. And she's looking for a more permanent position, and she's applying to this one at MIT. In the meantime, she's also working for some extra cash as a fake girlfriend on an app. I don't know if this is a service that exists in real life, but there's an app in the story where you can like work as a fake girlfriend, and people can hire you to like pretend to be their girlfriend to fool their family or like coworkers or whatever. And they're not supposed to do recurring gigs, but she has this client she really, really likes named like George or something, or Greg. I don't remember what his name is. But she really enjoys working with him, and so he's hired her a bunch of times, and so his family like fully believes that they've been together for like over a year at this point, I think. There are so many pieces to the premise of this story. I swear I'm not like spoiling anything. This is all like in the beginning. Now, Jack is George? What is that guy's name? You know, we're just gonna call him George to make life easier, okay? So Jack is George's brother, and Elsie doesn't know that Jack is an experimental physicist, and she lied about her job, so he thinks she's a librarian. Then Elsie applies at MIT, and much to her shock, Jack, she met by his short name, which is Jack. But he has a longer name, which is Jonathan. And Jonathan Turner Smith wrote some article a long time ago that really destroyed the entire theoretical physics community, and that she's actually hated him a really long time and she had no idea. Oh, and I'll reiterate, she's applying for a job at MIT, and he is on the board of people that's supposed to be helping hire her, and he thinks she's a librarian. That is quite the setup for a book. I'm like exhausted trying to explain all of that. Anyway, as much as there's a lot going on, like kind of in the beginning, and you have to kind of like get the premise down, I actually really, really like this. I think this is maybe my favorite of the 3 that I've read, just because it feels a little bit more mature. I honestly, I really enjoyed it. I did. I liked it a lot. I thought it was really cute. It's nice and steamy. Still has that same Allie Hazelwood feel. If you don't like Allie Hazelwood's other books, probably wouldn't like this. If you like her other books, you would like this. They're a bit of a formula. You know, you have like big stoic guy and small silly girl, and they fall in love. And it's a formula that works on me. I love me a good Grumpy Sunshine romance. So if you like no thoughts, only vibes, Grumpy Sunshine kind of romance, highly recommend Allie Hazelwood's books. If you don't, I don't recommend them. You would not like them. But yeah, gave it 4 stars. I rated it lower than the other one. I read the other one on a beach, you guys. I'll just remind you of that. I shook my camera and it fell, so if I moved a little bit, I'm very sorry. All right. It's been a long time. I have a lot of footage. Lipstick's almost faded off. Sun is setting, so I'm getting kind of weirdly side lit here. And I just for some reason remembered that there was not 1, but 2 wasps in my house earlier today, and I got one of them out through a door, but I had to call my dad to come kill the other one because it was upstairs and none of my windows fully open. And my mom kept telling me you could take a screen off, but I just, I tapped out. I called my dad. I did. And he made fun of me relentlessly before admitting after he did it that he was happy I called him because he had to hit it many times with the fly swatter before it died. So, hell of a day we've had here. That's it. That's the end. That's all she wrote. Those are the 11 books I've read so far this year. If you subscribe, what kind of content can you expect? Well, I don't know, because this is the first video I filmed. Yeah, but I'm excited. I'm happy about this. I hope the audio sounds okay. I've just been holding this mic the whole time. I did test it, but I guess we'll see if it held up through the whole recording. That would be really sad if it didn't. And with that, have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you later.